Ferodia's POV. 10 years earlier. The morning had come before long, the smell of delectable bug legs wafting through the air as Monty made breakfast during the last watch. Ferodia stirred from his place in the tree he had decided to sleep in, claws flexing and digging into the tree bark as he stretched his flexible feline body and yawned audibly. While he did have his own tent, Ferodius and Brazel had given up their tents to the noble ladies so they could sleep in relative comfort. Brazel, for one, didn't mind sleeping in the open air. As for Ferodius, he had long since grown accustomed to rougher living and was not unfamiliar with napping in trees during his youth. "Morning, Rhodey," Monty called up to Ferodius, looking up from his space beside the grill as he worked hard to ensure the meal would taste even better than yesterday's, since he had a little more experience with this particular protein. "What's the plan today?" he asked, adding another leg to a growing pile of cooked legs on a wooden plate. Ferodius let out a deep sigh of delight as he managed to pop his back, finding the relief he was looking for before slumping back against the tree trunk he had been sleeping against. He started to say, before yawning again as his left ear flicked. "Don't know," he said simply, looking down at Monty before scratching the back of his head. "I'm thinking we head back to that farming village that made the commission. Sure, we'll have to backtrack a little, but between the fact that there are potential bandits in the area and the state those noble ladies are in, we're better off getting a farmer to give us a ride in their cart," he explained, as he decided to make his way down to the tree, soon settling down across from Monty around the fire. Monty nodded intently, grabbing a plate and setting 2 cooked bug legs on it, before passing it over to Ferodius. "Sounds good to me. Maybe I can get a good deal on some crops and other goods before they hit the market stalls in the city," he mentioned with a bit of a smile as he went back to his work. "Besides, I'm sure the people will want to help, even if not out of the kindness of their hearts," Monty said simply, though that earned a curious head tilt from Ferodius, as Monty smiled kindly before continuing. "They'll help either because we just saved them a lot of trouble by dealing with those bugs, thus earning their favour, or they'll help us in the hopes that their gracious deeds will earn goodwill with their local lord, and maybe get some breaks on taxes or things like that," he explained before shrugging a bit. "I see," Ferodius said thoughtfully, having taken the plate and gone about cracking the bug kite in. "Well, either way, it'll be easier on the ladies, and we can rest our own feet while we're at it," he considered, before biting off a chunk of bug meat. Regan was the next to wake up, fully dressed this time as he stretched and grunted, before rubbing his eyes. "Morning," he murmured, before taking a seat around the fire with his pack in his lap as he rummaged through it. He then took up a small vial with green liquid after a minute or so of looking. He took a moment to eye the contents before uncorking it and downing the vial, though he immediately shuddered and made a face. "Bleh. Last time I cheap out with a herbalist," he muttered miserably. "What was that?" Ferodius asked between bites, while gesturing at the bottle with his tail. "Some kind of energy drink. The ingredients that they told me were in it sounded right according to my research, but it may be a knockoff. The taste wasn't nearly as good as I heard it was supposed to be," he explained as he smacked his lips, chasing down the energy drink with water from his skin, before uncorking it and putting it away. "Did you not sleep well or something? Bug nightmares?" Ferodius asked, licking at his teeth as he attempted to free a chunk of meat that was stuck between them, though he looked genuinely concerned for his friend as he watched Regan. Regan scoffed at the notion of nightmares, glancing over at Ferodius before flashing a smile. "Nah, nothing like that. I just use more mana than usual. I would prefer a longer rest in order to recuperate better, but we will be better off resting in a town, rather than attempting to get a couple of extra hours of shut-eye in the woods," he explained, yawning as he took up a plate of bug legs. "Though I will say, the only good thing about bugs is that they sure do taste good," he mused, digging in with no complaint as he cracked the chitin. Before long, everyone else started to wake. Brazel not saying much as he immediately started digging into breakfast. Danica was next, ruffling Monty's hair as she passed him to go into Ferodius and Brazel's tents, checking in with the ladies. Danica was quick to leave the tent Historietta was staying in. However, she lingered in the tent with the other two ladies. Ferodius could hear quiet sniffling and sobbing coming from the two women, his ears twitching, while Danica did her very best to comfort them. His heart did go out to those ladies. They likely haven't really experienced the world, and this was their first bitter taste of it. He hoped that it wouldn't drive them from society altogether, but it wasn't anything he could really control. Well, he could do his best to show them that the world altogether isn't cruel like their kidnappers, but it will be up to them to take the message to heart. Historietta emerged from the tent she was staying in, looking fairly rested and leagues better than she had last night. Her throat and face still looked discoloured from the lingering bruising that had been left over last night. Otherwise, she appeared to be in fair spirits. Ferodius couldn't help but steal a few glances at her. She was wearing his clothes, after all, and she certainly wore them better than he ever would. She managed to catch him staring and smiled in response, as she walked over to the fire and settled down beside him, before looking at Monty as he passed her a plate. "Thank you, sir. I'm grateful for the meal," she said politely, her voice sounding even nicer than the night before, if that was possible. She ate well, too, casually breaking the chitin and eating without reservation. Even the other ladies appeared to be modest and polite with how they ate last night, but it seemed Historietta didn't seem to mind her manners. She caught Ferodius watching her again, flashing a mischievous smile as she wiped her lips with the sleeve of her shirt. "Don't you know it's rude to stare at a lady while she's eating?" she teased, almost coyly. Ferodius could feel his cheeks heat up under his fur, pointedly averting his gaze as the other guy sniggered at his expense. Sorry, I don't exactly have a lot of experience with noble ladies," he lied, glancing over at her as his ears waggled. "But I was under the impression that most ladies were rather picky and haughty for the most part. He started stammering a bit, not sure what else to say without accidentally offending her, as he anxiously scratched his cheek. Historietta snickered softly as she sipped at a cup of water, before looking over at Ferodius more pointedly. "I've gone through this before, and I have a little experience with survival camping and roughing it. Honestly, I'm doing a lot better right now than I originally planned, thanks to you and your merry band," she mentioned, sounding genuinely grateful at that point, as she looked to the other guys before looking back to Ferodius. "Try everything once. It's a motto I live by," she said, as she worked on cracking the other bug leg on her plate. "It helped me to keep an open mind about many things, and allow me to experience things I would have otherwise missed out on," she explained, as she took a bite of bug meat, taking a moment to chew and swallow before continuing. "Of course, moderation is to be exercised with a motto like mine, but it's gone okay so far," she said with a smile. Ferodius was unsure how to move forward, not used to being on the back foot around other nobles, let alone noble girls around his age. Yet she displayed a rather unique sense of maturity that threw him off. It was refreshing, and he found himself wanting to get to know her more while he still could, at least. He was going to speak up again when Danica emerged with the other noble ladies. Those two looked pretty bad. If he was being honest, they looked exhausted and emotionally drained, among other things. They didn't say much besides their thanks after receiving some food and water. After a while longer, Ferodius spoke up again as he looked among his party and the ladies. "All right, everyone. We're going to be backtracking today and heading towards one of the farming villages in the area. From there, we're going to see about hiring or buying a cart and taking the road back to the city. This way we can save an energy and avoid more danger than we need to," he explained, as he looked among his party. He got looks of approval all around, though it looked like Historietta had something on her mind. "You're doing this because of us, aren't you?" she asked, sounding almost regretful, if not a little disappointed, as she looked at the other ladies. The other ladies averted their gazes, but didn't say anything in response, as they had no footing to argue with a count's daughter. Before Ferodius could respond, she looked back at him, gazing intently into his eyes. "I shall reimburse you once we get to the city. It's the least I can do," she said. No room for argument in her voice. Though Ferodius attempted to argue anyway, as he looked at her. "What? No, there's no need for that. You're in our care. It's only right to make sure you're looked after and supported, especially when you are so far from home," he retorted, his ear flicking as he watched her. "This isn't a job or a request. This is just people helping people," he said more gently, as he finished up his breakfast. Historietta quirked a brow, staring Ferodius down before flashing a smirk, as she finished up the last of her food and stood, looking him over when she met his gaze and spoke up. "Noblesse oblige. It is the duty of those who are well off and in positions of power to behave morally upright and act for the benefit of those in their care, to watch out for those who we are responsible for. You have done me a great service, and you did so freely and at an inconvenience to yourself and those who follow you. It would be a disgrace if I did not compensate you for your services," she stated with a grin, before starting to step away. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some flowers to pick," she said simply, as she moved away from the group. The others ate in silence for a little while longer, before getting to their feet to start packing up camp, now that breakfast was done. However, Ferodius was lost in thought, occasionally glancing in the direction he had last seen Historietta, before going back to his packing. He was in awe of her. She had brains, ferocity, compassion, worldliness, and a strong sense of duty. He never heard of the concept of noblesse oblige, but it was something he knew he was going to live by if he ever ascended to the throne. No, when he ascended to the throne. By the time she had returned, the camp was packed, and they were ready to go. The walk in itself was uneventful, feeling more along the lines of a simple hike through the woods, if it wasn't for the quiet whimpering of sore noble feet. Ferodius felt that the ladies were at least lucky, in the sense that they had been kidnapped while they were wearing flats. He couldn't even imagine having to run or even hike in heels, like they would have likely worn at the banquet they were coming from. Though he was more impressed by Historietta once again, the noble lady having kept pace with him, as he walked at the head of the group. As a group, they had to stop multiple times for the other two ladies, the whole walk taking much longer than Ferodius would have liked, though they eventually ended up at the village as the sun began its descent into the horizon, smokestacks rising into the sky, as families no doubt got ready for dinner. As they neared the village gate, a militia guard came out to meet the party, the man flashing a smile as he recognized Ferodius and his group. "Ah, good evening, adventurers. I take it you're back from the hunt," he asked pleasantly, though he only just noticed the ladies, looking curious, but waiting for Ferodius to speak. Ferodius offered a kind smile as his tail curled behind him. "Good evening. Yes, we finished the hunt. 37 bark bugs have fallen by our hands," he enthused, before clearing his throat. "In all actuality, we are here on more serious matters. We found 3 noble ladies who had been kidnapped, and are now escorting them. We are looking to hire anyone with a cart or a wagon willing to go to the city," he said, his ear flicking as he considered something else. "In fact, we are willing to escort a group of wagons with produce and goods for free, if you allow the ladies to ride along as passengers," he offered, Though before the guard could respond, Ferodius reached into his coin pouch in his pack and procured 8 silver pieces and placed them in the guard's hand. "Bring this to your village head. Tell him that we are also looking for room and board for the night, if anyone is willing to take us in." The guard stammered a bit at the overload of information, taking a moment to consider everything Ferodius said, as he glanced over at his fellow guard who had been standing at the village gate. He then looked back to Ferodius and his party before lowering his head with a nod. "Very well, sir adventurer. Come in and wait. I'll go fetch the village head," he said, taking one curious look at the ladies, before allowing them through the gate and hurrying off to find the village head. "Well, it looks like we'll get to rest with a roof over our heads, at least," Regan said with a bit of a smile, rolling his shoulders before leaning on his staff, looking admittedly worn out. "Maybe we'll get some fresh vegetables and soft bread, too," Monty mentioned as he flashed a grin. "These village mother types always cook the best foods for the soul," he mused cheerfully. "Oh, gods, soft bread," Danica parroted almost dreamily. "Probably freshly baked, too," she considered with a smile. All right, enough talking about food. You're making me hungry," Ferodius mused, as he looked among the party. 2 of the ladies had taken to sitting against some random crates along someone's fence line, looking especially exhausted. But Historietta seemed to be fine overall, if not as tired as Ferodius's group. She caught him watching her again, and only offered a smile but didn't say anything while they waited. Before long, the guard returned with an older rabbitkin man. He appeared to be in his late 50s, but stood strong and tall as he smiled at the group. "Welcome back, adventurers. I'm glad to see your safe return and hear of your success. It seems we have business to talk about, but for now, let's get you all inside and fed. I'll have someone draw water for baths. No doubt you are all rather weary and could use some creature comforts," he said as he looked at everyone. Ferodius smiled before lowering his head out of polite respect and looked up at the village head. "Thank you for your hospitality," he said politely, his left ear flicking contentedly. The rabbitkin flashed a charming grin. "Thank you for your work. It's thanks to you that we won't have to worry about our fall crops later this year," he expressed, before turning to lead the group. Historietta came up beside Ferodius and smiled as she nudged him with her elbow. "You handled all that pretty well. Good work, Mr. Adventurer," she mused almost playfully, before looking after the rabbitkin man and speaking more softly into Ferodius's ears, causing them to waggle at the sensation of her breath. "He's a good man. You can trust his sincerity," she whispered, before stepping away and rejoining the other ladies. Ferodius could feel his face warm up, his heart thumping at the sudden interaction he had with Historietta. He wasn't sure how she knew what she knew, or how she even knew that he had some doubts about the village head, but he'll admit it was something that he was vaguely worried about. But if someone of her character said he could trust the village head, then he would let his worries rest. It's strange, though. How is it that he could so readily trust the opinion of a girl he barely met a day ago? Maybe Regan was right. Maybe he really is hopelessly in love with that girl already.